Shy girl revealed her intimate part for an exam. And when the millionaire doctor saw it, she only meant to come to New York for a routine health check. But Emily Carter had no idea this trip would change her life forever. That Monday morning, Grand Central Station was packed with people. Emily clutched the strap of her backpack as she stepped off the train from North Carolina. Her long brown hair brushed her shoulders, and her hazel eyes reflected awe and uncertainty. Everything around her was loud, crowded, and constantly moving. So unlike the calm, familiar rhythm of her hometown, Asheville. "New York," she whispered, as if to remind herself that this was really happening. She didn't know it yet, but this city would not only test her strength, it would also reveal her heart. At 24, Emily had never lived away from home. The youngest of 3 siblings, she was used to cozy family dinners, her parents' laughter, and the warmth of their little house on the hill. But in recent months, something had changed. Intense abdominal pain began interrupting her days. After multiple inconclusive visits to doctors back home, one of her professors recommended a top women's health center in New York City. She had rented a tiny studio apartment in Brooklyn online. With her phone in hand, Emily double-checked the address. Her classmate, Claire, had promised to help her settle in, but wouldn't arrive until later in the day. Taking a deep breath, Emily adjusted her scarf and stepped out to face the unknown city. The subway was packed. She struggled to keep her balance, wedged between strangers. An older woman seated near the door noticed her unease and smiled kindly. "First time in New York, sweetheart?" Emily gave a small, shy smile. "That obvious? It's in your eyes. Don't worry. You'll get used to it." When she finally arrived in Brooklyn, she was greeted by honking horns, the scent of pizza, and the biting chill of early winter. The street where she would live was narrow and a bit worn, but the apartment building looked clean and well kept. The doorman, Mr. Davis, was in his 60s, silver-haired and surprisingly spry. "You must be the girl renting 3B. Welcome to Brooklyn. Anything you need, just holler." The studio was small but comfortable, a twin bed against the wall, a compact American-style kitchen, a simple bathroom, and a desk by the window offering a partial view of the street. Emily opened the window wide, letting in the cold air and the city's restless buzz. As she unpacked, she couldn't stop thinking about the appointment scheduled for the next morning. The name on the referral paper stood out. Dr. Nathan Cole. Her university professor had told her he was one of the leading specialists in reproductive endocrinology in the country. "I can't believe I'm actually seeing him," she murmured, hands trembling as she held the appointment slip. Her phone buzzed. It was a video call from her mother. "Sweetheart, did you arrive safely? Have you eaten yet?" "I'm okay, Mom. The apartment's small but really cute. I've got everything ready for tomorrow." She didn't say more. No need to worry her mom. After ending the call, Emily sat in silence for a moment before continuing to unpack. Outside, the city pulsed forward, unaware of her arrival. But for Emily, everything was just beginning. From a simple appointment, a new chapter was quietly unfolding. The next morning, Emily woke up earlier than usual. She put on a cream-colored sweater and dark jeans, simple but appropriate. Her hair was tied back neatly, and her eyes reflected quiet tension. This wasn't just any doctor's appointment. It was with one of the most highly regarded specialists in the field. The Women's Health Center stood on Madison Avenue, a tall, modern building with glass panels that reflected the pale gray New York sky. Emily paused at the entrance, took a deep breath, and stepped inside. The reception area gleamed, accented with well-maintained potted plants. A serious-looking receptionist checked her name on the list. "Emily Carter, appointment with Dr. Nathan Cole at 10:30. Please take a seat. We'll call you shortly." Emily chose a chair near the window, overlooking a small courtyard between 2 wings of the building. She tried to focus on an old medical journal on the table, but her eyes kept drifting to the clock. 10:35, 10:41. Each passing minute made her heart beat faster. At last, a nurse appeared. "Emily Carter?" She stood up a bit clumsily and followed the middle-aged woman with the gentle smile. The hallway stretched long, leading to a bright, quiet examination room. "Dr. Cole will be right in. Please change behind the screen and wear this gown. You can leave your clothes on the chair." Emily nodded. Even with her public health background, she still hadn't gotten used to the vulnerability of wearing a patient's gown, She changed quickly, then sat on the chair, fingers laced, hands cold. The door opened. The man who entered moved with quiet confidence. Of medium height, dark brown hair neatly combed, and striking green eyes behind thin frame glasses. "Good morning, Ms. Carter," he said in a calm, deep voice. "I'm Dr. Nathan Cole." "Good morning, doctor," she replied softly, trying to smile politely. "You can call me Emily." Nathan nodded and sat across from her, opening her digital chart. "You're from Asheville, North Carolina, referred by Professor Linda Morgan. Final year in public health, correct?" "Yes, that's right," Emily said, surprised he remembered so well. "Professor Morgan is someone I deeply respect," he said, eyes still on the screen. "She said you're a very diligent student." The way he said "you" with such familiarity made her blush slightly, though his tone remained purely professional. "Can you tell me more about your symptoms? I see notes here about chronic abdominal pain, no clear diagnosis so far, and some unsuccessful treatments." Emily explained in detail. The pain, irregular cycles, fatigue affecting her studies. Nathan took notes carefully, occasionally pausing to ask concise questions. "Thank you," he said once she finished. "I think we should start with a physical exam. Nurse Linda will assist." Emily swallowed hard, gripping the edge of her gown. She knew the steps, but the anxiety was real. Nathan seemed to notice. "You don't have to worry," he said gently. "I'll explain everything before I do anything. If you ever feel uncomfortable, just let me know." Throughout the exam, he kept his promise, announcing each step, speaking in a calm voice, and keeping his eyes focused without making her feel exposed. She stared at the ceiling, her cheeks burning, yet strangely reassured. When the exam ended, the nurse helped her get dressed. Nathan stepped out to give her privacy. A few minutes later, he returned and sat across from her with a composed demeanor. "Based on today's exam and the notes, I'd like to order a few additional tests, an ultrasound and blood work," he said, printing the request forms and handing them to her. "Try to complete them soon. I've scheduled a follow-up in 2 weeks." As she took the papers, her fingers brushed his. It was brief, but a flicker of electricity passed between them. They both paused, just long enough to notice. Emily looked down quickly, hoping he hadn't seen the flush rising in her cheeks. But somehow she knew he had. "Thank you, doctor," she said softly. "Nathan," he corrected gently. "If you're comfortable with that." Emily nodded, offering a faint smile. He walked her to the door, a gesture she sensed he didn't extend to every patient. As she stepped outside, Emily's mind swirled. She didn't know what had just happened, but one thing was clear. This was no longer just a medical visit. 2 weeks had passed since Emily first stepped into Dr. Nathan Cole's clinic. During that time, she had completed all the necessary tests, a pelvic ultrasound, hormone panels, and related labs. Each time she left the clinic, she felt something shifting, not just physically, but something deeper, warmer, and strangely unnameable. That Wednesday morning, rain fell gently across the city. Drops tapped rhythmically against the glass windows of the health center, echoing the steady beat of Emily's thoughts. She arrived 15 minutes early. A folder rested in her lap, unread. Her mind was somewhere else, on the upcoming conversation and on those calm green eyes. When the nurse called her name, Emily stood up, nodding slightly and followed. She wasn't as nervous as before, but her heart still beat faster than usual. The exam room looked the same, bright, tidy, with a faint scent of disinfectant and coffee. Nathan stood by the window, his back to her, reading something on a tablet. As she entered, he turned around and offered a soft smile. "Good to see you again, Emily. Please have a seat." She sat across from him as he pulled the computer screen toward her. "I've reviewed all your results. There's something I'd like to discuss with you today." Emily nodded, trying to steady her breath. She had prepared herself, but the seriousness in his gaze made her chest tighten. "Based on your ultrasound, hormonal tests, and the symptoms you described, I believe you have a condition called endometriosis." Emily wasn't surprised. She had suspected it, had read about it, but hearing it confirmed by someone like him still hit hard. Endometriosis occurs when tissue similar to the uterine lining grows outside the uterus, often on the ovaries, fallopian tubes, or pelvic walls, Nathan explained, voice clear and steady. "It can cause pain, irregular cycles, and sometimes fertility issues. I've read about it, Emily said quietly, but I was hoping maybe it wasn't that. I understand, Nathan said, meeting her eyes. That's a very real reaction. But the important thing is that now we know, and we can act. She nodded, biting her lip. We have a few treatment paths, he continued, opening a file. I recommend starting with hormonal therapy, medications that regulate estrogen and slow the growth of the misplaced tissue. If symptoms don't improve in a few months, we may consider surgery. Emily listened closely, asking thoughtful questions. Nathan answered thoroughly, with precision but also clarity. He didn't speak down to her. Instead, he treated her as someone capable of understanding and engaging. I'm wondering about side effects, she said. Will it affect mood or energy? It might, he acknowledged. Some people experience fatigue or mood changes at first, but most adjust over time. The key is for you to monitor how you feel and communicate, whether with me or with another provider if you choose. She offered a small smile. So, there's a long road ahead. It won't be easy, Nathan replied, smiling too, but you won't walk it alone. A quiet pause settled in the room, not awkward, but gentle, as if they were both reflecting on something beyond charts and diagnoses. Their eyes met, and this time neither of them looked away. Thank you for not talking down to me, for not treating me like just a student, she said softly. Because you're not just a student, he said just as softly. You're someone going through something real, and I respect your courage. Emily looked down, hiding a smile. Nathan printed the prescription, noted the next follow-up, then walked her to the door. When their hands brushed, neither of them pulled away immediately. Reach out if you need anything, he said. I will, she answered, warmth in her voice. On her way home, the rain had stopped, but something inside Emily still trembled. Not from the diagnosis, but from something else. Something she wasn't ready to name just yet. Emily returned to her tiny apartment on a quiet, windless afternoon. The old stairs echoed beneath her steps, yet her thoughts remained back at the clinic, where a diagnosis had been spoken and where someone's gaze had quietly taken root in her mind. She wasn't sure what unsettled her more, the idea of starting a long treatment journey or the growing sense that something between her and Dr. Cole was beginning to drift beyond the boundaries of what was considered ordinary. And in the days that followed, amid the rush of a city still unfamiliar to her, Emily began to change, bit by bit. Emily's life in New York gradually settled into a rhythm after her follow-up appointment. The crowded streets, packed subway rides, and endless honking began to feel strangely familiar. She learned to grocery shop on her own, cook simple meals, and take detailed notes on how her body responded to the new medication. Each night, she spent time reading medical journals about endometriosis, as if knowledge could somehow give her control over what was happening inside her. But no matter how focused she tried to be, images of Dr. Cole still drifted into her thoughts. Sometimes his steady gaze, sometimes that gentle smile as he handed her the prescription. Claire, her former classmate who lived just a few subway stops away, called often to check in. One Friday afternoon, they met at a small park near Brooklyn to get some fresh air. You look different, Claire said, biting into a pastry while eyeing Emily. Not sick different, more like fluttery heart different. Emily laughed. You're reading too much into things. Uh-huh. And who reads every clinical study on their condition for fun? She didn't reply. A soft breeze rustled the tree branches above, carrying a crisp chill. Emily looked up at the slow-drifting gray clouds and realized Claire wasn't entirely wrong. That evening, while preparing a simple dinner of pasta and roasted vegetables, her phone buzzed. A message lit up the screen. Hi, Emily. It's Nathan. Just wanted to check how you're feeling with the meds. Any issues? Her heart skipped slightly. She quickly typed a response, trying to keep the tone casual. Hi, doctor. I'm okay. Some mild nausea, but manageable. I'm monitoring closely. Less than a minute later, her phone rang. It was him. You reply fast. His voice came through, a little warmer than usual. I was in the kitchen. My phone was right here, she said with a soft chuckle. I'm glad you're doing okay. The nausea usually fades after a few weeks. If not, we can explore other options. Thanks. I'll let you know if anything changes. A short pause followed. Then Nathan's voice lowered slightly. There's a women's health symposium this weekend at Mount Sinai Hospital. I have a guest pass. I thought you might find it interesting. Would you like to come? Emily hesitated for a moment. She knew this was a professional invitation, and yet the flutter in her chest didn't feel professional at all. I'd love to, she replied quietly. Great. Saturday, 8:30 a.m. Main lobby. I'll meet you there. When the call ended, Emily stood still in her little kitchen. Steam from the boiling pot fogged the mirror above the stove, but her heart felt clearer than it had in weeks. Something was changing, not just in her body, but somewhere deeper, within her. Saturday morning brought a rare, crisp clarity to the New York sky. Emily wore a navy blue suit Claire had lent her, hair pulled into a low bun, a touch of makeup softening the shadows under her eyes. She'd spent the night wondering if this invitation was purely academic or something else entirely. Emily arrived 10 minutes early. The grand lobby of Mount Sinai Hospital gleamed under bright lights, with banners for the symposium lining the glass corridors. She stood still for a moment, calming her breath, fingers gripping the strap of her bag. From across the room, she spotted Nathan near the information desk, holding 2 guest passes. When he saw her, the smile in his eyes eased the tension inside her. "Good morning, Emily," he said, handing her the badge. "Glad you made it." "I'm glad too. Thanks for inviting me." They walked together into the large auditorium where the event was about to begin. Nearly every seat was taken, but Nathan had already reserved 2 spots in the 3rd row, close enough for a good view, but not too exposed. "Do you go to these often?" Emily asked in a whisper as they sat. "Now and then, but today's speaker was one of my mentors during residency. I didn't want to miss it." The presentation began. The speaker introduced innovations in endometriosis treatment, highly relevant to Emily. She listened intently, occasionally jotting notes into her notebook. But she also noticed something else. Nathan wasn't just observing the presentation. He was watching her, her focus, her expressions, the way she tilted her head slightly when intrigued. During the break, they moved to the coffee lounge. A few colleagues greeted Nathan warmly. He introduced Emily as a dedicated and sharp public health student, causing her cheeks to flush. An older doctor joked, "Careful, Nathan. She might be the one presenting here in a few years." Everyone laughed. But then a well-dressed woman in her 50s tilted her head and asked, "And what about Beatrice? Still in Paris?" Emily froze. Beatrice? Who was that? She glanced at Nathan, waiting. A brief flicker crossed his face, but he quickly returned to neutral. "She's no longer there. Things ended last year," he said, light as if it barely mattered. "Oh," the woman nodded, then moved on. But Emily couldn't. She smiled politely, said nothing, but inside something uneasy began to stir. Back in the auditorium, she resumed her notes, still sitting beside him. But her focus had fractured. Who was Beatrice? An ex? Or a fiancé? Why hadn't he mentioned her before? After the symposium, Nathan invited her to lunch at a nearby cafe. The space was cozy, their table by a sunlit window. At first, the conversation was technical, healthcare models, policy approaches, but slowly the space between them softened. "I chose public health because of my grandmother," Emily said, stirring her water. "She was the neighborhood caregiver. I grew up hearing her footsteps at every doorstep, her kind voice. I wanted to make that kind of difference." Nathan smiled. "My mother was a nurse. I started out following my father's path. He's a cardiac surgeon. But during residency, I realized I wanted something more personal, a field where patients weren't just cases." "And reproductive endocrinology gave you that?" "Yes," he nodded. "It's where people are most vulnerable and where medicine needs the most compassion." Emily looked at him. In that moment, he no longer seemed like the reserved doctor behind a desk. He was someone real, honest, open, and very human. As they left the cafe, Nathan paused before speaking. "If there's ever anything you feel unsure about, medically or otherwise, you can tell me. I'll understand." Emily met his eyes. In them, she saw empathy and a quiet space still left unspoken. "Thank you, I know," she said. They parted at the hospital entrance. No handshake, no boundary crossed. But on her way home, Emily knew. Something between them had shifted, just slightly, but irreversibly. That afternoon ended with a soft smile and a look Emily couldn't forget. They parted at the hospital's restaurant exit. No touch, no promises. Just a quiet pause, as if both were holding back something they weren't ready to say. But later that evening, as Emily reopened her laptop to review the last speaker's notes from the symposium, she stumbled upon an old feature article on Dr. Nathan Cole. At the top of the page was a photograph. Nathan standing beside a young woman with long brown hair, a warm smile, her hand gently resting on his shoulder. The caption read, "Dr. Nathan Cole and fiancée, Dr. Beatrice H." A strange chill ran through Emily's spine. She wasn't sure what unsettled her more, the appearance of the photo or the creeping sense that she might unknowingly be stepping into something still unresolved. She didn't sleep much that night, and through the quiet hours, one question echoed in her mind. Had he truly moved on from that chapter, or was he simply not ready to begin a new one? All weekend after the symposium, Emily couldn't stop thinking about the name Beatrice. Though Nathan had responded simply, "It ended," the vagueness in his tone stayed with her. She remembered his expression in that moment, a brief pause in his voice, a subtle shift in his eyes. Not jealousy, just a need to know. Where exactly did she stand? On Monday night, she sat by the window of her tiny apartment. The city below was alive as always, but inside, everything was still. Her phone rested on the table. She touched the screen, hesitated, then typed, "Can we meet for a few minutes this weekend? There's something personal I need to ask." The message was marked as read within a minute. "Friday after work, you pick the place." They met at a quiet cafe tucked away in the Upper West Side. Soft yellow lighting touched the exposed brick walls, giving the space a warm calm. Emily arrived early, choosing a corner table. She didn't drink her tea, only held the warm cup to keep her hands from trembling. When Nathan walked in, she looked up. He wore a gray shirt and light jacket. Nothing out of the ordinary, yet something about him slowed her heart. "You okay?" he asked, sitting across from her. "I'm fine. Thanks for coming." She inhaled deeply, keeping her voice steady. "At the symposium, someone mentioned a woman named Beatrice." Nathan nodded, not surprised. "I want to know," she continued, "who was she? And is there something unfinished between you?" He met her gaze directly. No deflection, no denial. "Beatrice was my girlfriend. We were together for almost 3 years. When I got an offer to research in Europe, we planned to move together. But a few months before the trip, things shifted. She chose a different path. We broke up." "And the photo?" Emily asked. "Probably an old one. Medical press tends to reuse images from past events." She nodded. Part of her felt lighter. Another part wasn't sure what to feel. "I didn't mention her," he added, "because I didn't think it was relevant anymore. But I should have told you. You deserve to know." She was silent, then softly said, "I just didn't want to be anyone's shadow." "You never were," Nathan said immediately. "You've been your own light, since day one." There was a pause. Not awkward, just honest. Then he said slowly, "There's something else I need to tell you. And maybe now is the right time." She looked up, listening. "I've transferred your case to another physician, a female colleague, very skilled and compassionate. Starting next week, you'll see her instead." Emily's breath caught. "Why?" "Because I can't keep treating you when my feelings for you have crossed the professional line." Her chest tightened. She had half expected it, but it still landed with weight. "You're a patient, but you're also someone I care about. And if there's even the possibility of exploring that, I can't do it as your doctor." She looked at him for a long moment. In his eyes, she saw respect. Not possession, not hesitation. A man choosing what was right, even if it hurt. "I understand," she whispered. "I don't expect anything from you," Nathan said gently. "I just want you to know what I feel is real. And if someday you want to explore what that might mean, I'll be here." Outside, the rain had started. Droplets tapped softly on the cafe windows, blurring the city lights. Emily looked out, then back at the man before her, someone who had placed integrity above impulse. She didn't answer right away. She only nodded, so lightly it was almost invisible. But inside, she knew something had changed. 3 weeks had passed since their last conversation at the cafe. Emily still attended classes, still clocked in for her hospital shifts, still lived in her quiet little apartment, but everything now carried a strange weightlessness. Nathan didn't call, didn't text. She didn't either. Not out of anger or doubt, but because they both knew something had begun, but it wasn't yet ready to be named. Until one early April morning, when her inbox flashed a subject line that nearly made her drop her coffee mug. "Congratulations, you've been selected for the Barcelona Medical Internship Program." She read the email 3 times just to make sure she wasn't imagining things. It was a 6-month exchange program for top nursing students from American universities. She had applied months ago and nearly forgotten about it. But now the opportunity was real. That very evening, just as she was finishing her hospital shift, her phone rang. The name on the screen made her heart skip a beat. Nathan Cole. "Emily," his voice came through, low and familiar. "I just received an offer from a gynecological research institute in Barcelona, a 6-month fellowship. Seems like we're unintentionally headed in the same direction." Emily froze for a moment. She couldn't tell what moved her more, the unexpected call after weeks of silence or the uncanny coincidence. "I just got accepted into an internship program there," she said quietly. There was a brief pause, and then Nathan laughed, a soft, spring-like laugh, gentle and honest, melting away weeks of silent uncertainty. "Maybe," he said, "it's finally time for us to stop keeping our distance." Their next meeting at Riverside Park didn't feel like any of their past encounters. No white coats, no examination rooms, no sterile walls of a consultation office. Just 2 people sitting side by side, slowly unwrapping the doubts, boundaries, and silent rules that once kept them apart. "I used to think I came to New York just to study," Emily said, seated next to Nathan on the wooden bench, cherry blossom petals drifting softly onto their shoulders. "But everything changed the day I met you." Nathan looked at her, not with the gaze of a physician, but of a man truly seeing her, without filters or fear. "And I changed too," he said, "from someone who lived only for his work to someone afraid of losing something fragile, but very real." They didn't need many words. They just sat there, quiet but whole. In that moment, Barcelona wasn't just a destination on a professional map. It became a turning point, not just for their individual careers, but for something quietly growing between them. Something both were finally ready to begin. On the train ride home after that meeting, Emily rested her head against the window, watching golden light streak past like the city's quiet breathing. Inside her was a strange feeling, not quite excitement, not exactly worry, just calm. A steady comfort that told her, whatever Barcelona might bring, she wouldn't be facing it alone. Nathan, too, sat quietly in his small office at the hospital, staring at the confirmation email for the research fellowship. Years of clinical training had taught him to decide with his mind. But this time, something within him urged him to choose with his heart. They both knew this was more than a prestigious career opportunity. It was a fresh setting, a distant but welcoming city, where they could begin again. No longer confined by old roles, old boundaries. They would no longer be doctor and patient. Just Nathan and Emily. 2 people carrying their own stories, meeting at a life crossroads. And this time, neither of them wanted to keep walking alone. The days leading up to Emily's departure for Barcelona passed faster than she expected. Between finalizing paperwork, packing her bags, and saying goodbye to friends and professors, she barely had time to think. But each night, just before sleep, Nathan's face would drift back into her thoughts, his eyes and that quiet smile they shared in the park, as if the world had briefly narrowed to just the 2 of them. She didn't know what waited for her in Europe, but one thing was certain. This time she wasn't leaving to escape. She was leaving to begin something new, for herself and maybe for the 2 of them. JFK Airport was packed that morning, a blur of movement and announcements. But in Emily's world, there was only one person, Nathan. He stood beside her, hands in his coat pockets, eyes warm but tinged with sadness. From the speakers above, her flight to Barcelona was called again. steady and impersonal. Emily gripped the strap of her backpack a little tighter, doing her best to keep her smile steady, but her heart felt heavy. "I have something for you," Nathan said, reaching into his pocket and pulling out a small velvet box in deep blue. Emily opened it. Inside lay a delicate silver necklace, its pendant a tiny star that sparkled under the airport lights. "So you'll remember that even in the darkest moments of my life, it was your light that made me believe again," he said, voice barely above a whisper. "And no matter how far apart we are, a part of me will always walk beside you." Emily smiled through misty eyes. "I'll treasure it, and I won't forget that you believed in me, even before I knew how to believe in myself." She stepped into the boarding line, each step pulling at her heart. But when she turned back, saw Nathan still standing there, arm raised in a quiet wave, eyes never leaving hers. Emily knew she wasn't walking away alone. She thought back to those early days in New York, the wide-eyed small-town girl who feared subways, strange stares, and overly technical English. But now she was heading into a new chapter, with a prestigious internship, with a courage she hadn't known she possessed, and with a feeling not yet named, but deeply rooted in her heart. As the plane lifted into the sky, she looked out the window. The city shrank beneath her. Skyscrapers blurred into geometry. The sky stretched wide open, endless. Emily reached up, gently touching the necklace around her neck. We all have our journeys, and maybe the most special ones are those that make us want to keep walking, not just for ourselves, but for someone else too.